What do you think about the situation now in France with the Roma? Don't you think that there is kind of crossing a red line? I mean, you were speaking about the difference between Europe and the United States. But what is going now in France is kind of, I would say, and I want to know what do you think about it, that they are crossing some kind of a line with the Roma that was not crossed after World War II. And this is a new phenomenon now in Europe, what they're doing with the Roma. And actually, the world is keeping silent in a way. So I was wondering, what is your opinion about it?
You know, first, I will talk in slightly more general context because the very specific details of French responses right now, I haven't followed it to that extent, but I know the general outline of this. First, we have to know that this is not the first time. In fact, there were large numbers of Roma who were coming particularly from Romania to Germany already 10 years ago. And they were basically sold back to the Romanian government. That is, the German government paid for the Romanians to take them back. Moreover, anti-Roma sentiment in Central Europe, indeed also in Western Europe, and certainly in Eastern Europe, is very widespread. And discrimination against Roma all over Eastern Europe is a completely prevalent phenomenon. So what we are talking about, and this context is important, is not simply that the French government is doing something that most civilized people find unacceptable. It's that in fact most Europeans, whatever their political ideology, on one level or another do find acceptable. And they find that acceptable vis-a-vis Roma, which they would not have found acceptable and would not have been able to say is acceptable had it been policies against Jews. So this, of course, has to do also with the fact that unlike the case of the Holocaust against the Jews, which eventually became a major issue in European politics, in fact, the EU, in integrating East European countries, had compelled these countries to face up to their own past in the Holocaust, so that they, despite their reluctance to do so, they had to face up to that past. That never happened with the Roma. So this is one really important issue. This is not, it is exceptional in the sense that here you have a president who's quite openly talking about it, but it's not exceptional in terms of the general attitude of Europeans toward the Roma. Now, specifically about France, France is to my mind, really a curious and interesting case. Because you can speak about what is happening in France not only in the sense of policies vis-a-vis the Roma, which are really socio-economic policies. These are policies against what the Nazis like to call the asocials, the asoziale. France has also chosen a very strict policy about Muslims, particularly public institutions and public education. That is, they are not allowing the use of the veil. And French commentators do not respond to these policies, particularly not the policies of the veil, in the same way as one would anticipate. And that has to do with France's own past. So people who are real Republicans, who are the core of the Republic, intellectuals, left-wing intellectuals in France, have a difficult time coping with these issues. And that's what I was hinting at before as well. Because for them, the core identity of France since the French Revolution is the complete separation between religion and state. For them, France has to be a secular country as a state. If people choose to have a religion, that's their business. But it's not the business of the state, and religion has no business interfering in the state. Now, of course, if you have to contend with a very large group of people who have come into France who have a completely different worldview. They don't have to be fundamentalists at all, but they have a different worldview. For them, religion is part of their daily life. It is a question, how do you deal with that? Do you deal with it in the American way, as some French intellectuals would say? Do you become pluralistic and open-minded, or do you insist on your Republican values? That is, religion is not in public spaces. It is a private affair. This is a big issue. Now, to go back to the Roma, the problem with the Roma, as I can understand it, apart from there being a strong prejudice that is very deep in European history, as deep as prejudice against Jews, and prejudice against vagrants, which becomes increasingly important as the European state becomes bureaucratized and policed, and so people who wander from place to place are really not liked. We know that people who don't have a permanent address still have a hard time voting in many countries, of course, so that would include Roma. There is a kind of organizing principle in the modern state which gypsies, by their very way of living, are supposed to be against, whether they have an opinion about that or not. But beyond that, it is a question of social policies. And European countries today have huge difficulties keeping up their social promise to their populations. And they're trying somehow to deal with that. And part of what they do is they are cutting off at the edges. And once they start doing that, then of course they go against the weakest parts of their populations. And Roma are the weakest part because no one supports them. Because no one, as you say, no one really cares. So you could say, indeed, this is the test case for Europe. Where will it start responding to a real crisis, a crisis of aging, a crisis of less and less wherewithal for helping their own populations? Where will they start cutting? Where will they hit first? And they obviously right now are going against the most defenseless.